I think the most common pattern that I see is that when we start out, we are the chief everything person because there is no one else. So what we learn is that to get from 6 to 7 figures, everything comes back to me. It's how hard can I work? How innovative can I be? How many things can I try? How good can I be at delivering my product or my service? It all comes back to me. When we get past and beyond the 7 figures, the challenge is that that mindset starts to actively block us. It starts to actively bottleneck us because we've taught ourselves.
Well, hey, welcome to Build to Sell, another episode. And today I'm so excited because I get to chat with this unbelievable person that I met a few weeks ago at an event. And sometimes you meet people and you hear them talk through their philosophy of building businesses and solving the challenges that everyone faces in business. And you're just sort of left. Sometimes it's like, whatever. But a lot of times you're left saying, yes, exactly. Right. And you get to hear someone who you can tell shares a lot of the same thoughts. So without further ado, I'm so excited to hear and chat with Jhana Li today from Spyglass Operations. Hey, Jhana, how are you?
I am so excited to be here. I felt exactly the same way when you opened your mouth, you started sharing kind of your values, your philosophy. I think this is just going to be a fun, nerdy session.
Yes, let's go nerd. So not only did I get to hear Jhana speak, but at this event, there were breakout sessions. And it just so happened that I was scheduled to jump into one of Jhana's breakouts. And really, most of the sessions that I go to, I'm just sort of a fly on the wall. And I'm just sort of listening and hearing what everybody has to say, because there's great value in getting reps to listen to folks' challenges. Even if you're not working with them, there's just a lot of value in that. And Jhana, what your company does, I don't want to say it for you. I want you to tell us what you do, but you got into a lot of very practical solutions that almost every entrepreneur, every person who I know that's scaling runs into. So if you would, just give us a little bit about Spyglass and what you do.
Yeah, totally. So the 30-second overview of me and my background is that I am the former COO for multiple different businesses. And so I approach business from that unique operational lens. And Spyglass Ops, which is my company, I started it about 3.5 years ago. And it's taken all of the data and the knowledge that I compiled over, years and years of being a COO and an operations coach for, at this point, hundreds of different startups, and built all of that into a methodology that we now help our clients roll out within their business, right? And so we are there to identify the operational bottlenecks, the reasons that our clients aren't scaling as quickly or as frictionlessly as they want to, the reason they're not at their goal yet. We identify why that is. We plug in the right second in command operator to help them actually fix that issue and clear that bottleneck. And then we work with that person and execute through that operator to create, the internal transformation that needs to take place in that business in order for that founder to not only, achieve their revenue goal, achieve their valuation goal, whatever that might be, but also achieve real freedom and independence from the business so that when it is ready to sell, a buyer actually wants it because they aren't buying, an 80-hour-a-week job. They're buying a self-managing machine.
Buying a self-managing machine. Gosh, I love that. So many words popped into my mind when you were talking, right? And sequentially, it was scale, friction, freedom, exit. And
love it.
Those are really the words that I walk folks through in the journey, because a lot of times as an M&A advisor who specializes in exits and getting someone prepared, look, sometimes folks come to me and they are absolutely ready. That's rare. Sometimes they come to me and they think they're ready. That's common. Sometimes they come to me and they know they're not ready, but they want to become so. And there's a different continuity of where they begin and where you're trying to get them to. And a lot of times when you start digging in, and sorry to be so cliche, but you peel back the layers and you listen to them, sometimes the very reason that they're wanting to sell, even if they don't admit it to themselves consciously or subconsciously, is actually not that they want to sell the business. It's that they're burnt out and they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's strange for someone who does what I do to try and talk someone out of selling, but I will. If I think that the reason for them wanting to exit the business is a solvable problem, which is everything you just described, I'll say, well, hang on a minute. If X, Y, and Z were true, and you could either maintain your current growth rate, revenue, profit, and not have to be working 80 or 90 hours a week, and be the chief everything, which is what usually
Yeah.
folks are. Would you want to sell it still, or would you want to keep it? And usually they're sort of like, well, yeah, I'd like to ride a unicorn too, but that's
You're
not,
right, exactly.
that's not possible. And what I really loved about what you did, and some of I got to see some, I call them interventions. So really quick, there was a table of folks in Jenna's breakout, and you get to sort of go to each person and say, hey, what's the number one thing in 3 minutes that's facing you in your business?
Yeah.
And you got to sort of work through in real time some of their challenges. So what is, especially in the startup world, right? So that's where a lot of us live. So I'm middle market, and most of the folks that I work with, they began as a startup and bootstrapped their way through. And you run into this interesting yet probably predictable series of problems that happen in the life cycle of business, from zero, when you have nothing, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then on and on. What are some things that you consistently see as friction points for folks that sort of are really good at doing something and they grow in spite of their own limitations? And then what happens, and how do you address those things?
Yeah. Okay. Amazing question. So in broad strokes, and then we can drill down, I think the most common pattern that I see is that because I'm also a bootstrap entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So like when we start out, we are the chief everything person because there is no one else, right? And so what we learn is that to get from 6 to 7 figures, everything comes back to me. It's how hard can I work? How innovative can I be? How many things can I try? How good can I be at delivering my product or my service? It all comes back to me. I am the creator of my own success. And we just repeat that loop again and again and again, because again, there's no one else. So it has to be true. When we get past and beyond the 7 figures, the challenge is that mindset starts to actively block us. It starts to actively bottleneck us because we've taught ourselves that no one in the business can do as good of a job as I can. It is faster and easier for me to just step in and do something versus trying to figure out how to systemize it or delegate it effectively. It is, like in order for our clients to get the best results, in order for us to close at the highest close ratio, I have to be there. I have to move it forward. And so we actively become the bottleneck to the business. Nothing can move forward without me. And that is opposite. It's the exact opposite of what most of us are trying to build with our businesses, which is either a scalable asset that we can one day sell, or a lifestyle machine. And neither of those things can happen if you are required to move everything in the business forward. So there's this massive unlearning that needs to happen right around, the 7-figure and above run rate, where we have to shift from my success comes to me, everything is reliant on me, and we have to almost flip that script into success comes from my team. Success comes from my systems. Success comes from a repeatable outcome that I'm able to create with or without me present. And how do I create a machine and an ecosystem that will deliver success, whether I'm there to move the needle forward or not? And so it's this really radical shift in thinking that needs to take place in order for founders to work themselves out of that corner.
I love that. I love it. And so I go back to my first few times where I started a business and scaled them up. And these are lessons that you either learn and you figure out how to overcome and adapt. And really for me, it's getting out of our own way. And over time, and working with enough entrepreneurs, all of whom have such a heart for, when we're working to solve a problem. And in my case, when you're trying to get to an exit, you said something in your breakout that immediately just hit me, because I say it in a different way, but all the time, which is a lot of times folks think it's either or. Either I'm going to exit, or I'm going to make some significant differences in the way that I run my business, bring some people in. And it really isn't, because the truth is, as someone who's done almost $1 billion worth of exits, one has to be true in order for the other one to be possible. Because the reality is, if you look at things through the eyes of someone who might acquire your business, you said it earlier, they don't want to buy a job. They don't want to buy a problem, unless the problem is so specific and unique and they just happen to have an organizational strength where they know we can go easily fix this problem. Most of the time, that's not the case. And so building a business to sell it and doing the things that would make it a really attractive business for an exit, guess what? Those are exactly the same things that you should be doing to have a business that you want to own and continue to run. And the way that I usually get folks to think through this is I just flip it and I say, listen, let's say that you had X amount of money, whatever the enterprise value is, but you didn't own a business right now and you were bored and you were looking for something to do. And I presented you with a blind version of your business and everything that is true about it. Would you buy it? And what would you pay for it? And usually when you do that, it still takes a minute because we're all hypersensitive and even defensive at times about our own businesses. Sure. But when you do it that way, it sort of short circuits and bypasses the part of the mind that's ethereal, and it goes to just being really critical and say, oh, shoot. Well, when you put it that way, I wouldn't buy it because this, and this. So getting from here to here, where you've been the reason for the success of the business. You have a unique set of skills. You solve certain problems, and you are the one that can get in there and crush it, to really being the person who brings others in to do those mission critical tasks who may, and here's a crazy thing for the audience, they might be better at it than you. You never know. They might be better at it than you. And so that was a great challenge for me when I would scale, because it's not ego. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's not ego. It's actually fear. It's fear of, if you give up a little bit of control, then the quality of your service, or the quality of your product, or key deadlines, or whatever, what if they don't get hit? Well, what if you keep doing things the way that you've been doing them, and you get so successful that they don't get hit because there's just one of you? So what I'll say to folks, and I'd love to get your take on this, is up to a certain level, and it's usually between 7 and 8 figures. It depends on your business. Sometimes you can get a little bit into 8 figures before this happens. But what needed to be true of you, who you needed to be to get from 0 or whatever to here, was one thing that we can put in a box. What now has to be true of you to get from where you are to where you're trying to go is often an entirely different thing. You go from being an unbelievable individual producer of whatever to needing to become good at organizational leadership, managing people, leading people, teaching people. And so the question always is, at that scale inflection point, are you willing to make that change? Are you willing to become uncomfortable? Because it will be uncomfortable. But there's some tools that a lot of folks are not aware of. They may have heard of them, and even if they have heard of them, they're not familiar with what they are. But they can take some of the mystery, the pain, the unpredictability, and the confusion out of systematizing scale. And one of them that you talked a lot about that I love, I was probably the one person in the room when you first started talking that, I kind of jumped a little bit when I heard you say it, was OKRs, because I love OKRs. I love their elegance, and I love the way that they move together. Can you talk in whatever depth you want about OKRs and how they play into taking an organization from sort of, we've been doing this and this, and we've just sort of been winging it, and now we need to scale. But we don't really know how to build in an infrastructure and a team and accountability around how to go from what we've been doing to the scale we need to get to.
Yeah, totally. So going back to kind of what I was saying earlier of the key shift is one of, I make everything happen, me, the founder, towards I create an ecosystem where everything happens, right? Away from I get the right work done towards I ensure the right work gets done by somebody else. OKRs are very simply a methodology to help you do that. They are there to help you take the decisions and the strategy and the growth and the vision that you see in your brain and translate that into a clear set of actionable priorities that aligns your entire team and ensures that every single person, every single day is working on the right priority actions within their role, within the business, to help move it forward in a single direction. The benefit and the outcome of OKRs is alignment. And because you have alignment, you have speed. Everyone is driving and rowing in the same direction. So OKRs is fancy talk. It's called Objective Key Results is what it stands for. And it's very simply it's a management framework for you to decide as the founder, here is the number one highest priority objective that our business is going to achieve in the next 90 days, right? You get to decide that as the founder. You set the number one highest value goal. And then from there, you have one objective and 3 to 5 key results. The key results are created such that by achieving every key result, the objective is guaranteed. And then the OKRs cascade and spill out from there. So that's a little bit more probably even JV than we'd be able to get into, and I'd be able to describe well without a visual diagram on this podcast.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you are as a founder struggling to make sure that everybody is working on the right things, everyone is rowing in the same direction, if you feel your company is slowing down, if you feel like you're spending a lot of time running around, herding cats, telling people what to do every day just to make sure it's getting done, then OKRs might be a framework for you to look into.
Love it, love it, love it. Let's go. I don't know if you guys listening to this are as excited as I am, but anytime you see, and look, why am I excited? It's like, oh gosh, one, I'm an excitable guy, but also the greatest service that we can be of to others, to our businesses, to the folks that work for us, to the folks that depend on us, to our customers who depend on us to provide fantastic products that we provide or services, is to do so in a way that is infinitely scalable and efficient and fairly predictable. And what I love about objectives and key results as a sort of format and a tool is that it gives some of that predictability to you and cuts through a sea of confusion. And the sea of confusion is where a lot of folks find themselves when they really are just like, okay, we've hit this plateau. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. My team's tired. My team's exhausted. I don't even 100% know if I have enough staff. I don't know that I don't have enough staff or do.
Right.
I don't know how to work through this issue. So what I love is that objectives and key results are a very relatively black and white, but still flexible way to say, okay, let's zoom out a little bit from the day to day and say, what are the most important 3 to 5 things that the organization needs to do in order to be successful in the next, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And then from those, let's say you have your 5 within your organization, hierarchically, you just then drill down and do the same thing in each key subject area. So you do the same thing for marketing. And then once you go down to marketing, you do the same thing depending on the nature of your business. So, all right, whoever is responsible for, maybe it's a CMO role, or maybe you're not large enough to have a CMO and it's still you, but you have folks who are working underneath you, and you have, maybe copy needs that are relevant. You have media buying needs. You have any number of things that have to happen in order for you to market your services to other people. A cascade of OKRs that all roll up to the same sort of hierarchical 3 or 5, whatever that is, to me is just a little bit of a hack to be able to take the nebulous and turn it actionable. Another thing that I think is interesting, and I don't know if you hear this, but sometimes folks get confused about use case of OKRs and exclusion. And so they'll think, it just happened the other day where I had a gentleman who, a lot of the challenges that not using OKRs will bring to you, lack of follow through, lack of sort of consistent accountability, he was running into, and I was talking with him about it, and he said, well, we use EOS. I don't understand why it's not working. We use EOS, so it doesn't make sense to bring something in. And for those that don't know, EOS is just another sort of entrepreneurial operating system that it does have within it some really solid organizational tools to move you forward. Here's the challenge that I run into. The folks falsely, I think, believe that those two things can't live in harmony. And in that EOS to me is really more of a high level way to go about moving your business forward, mostly for leaders and founders of the organization. It doesn't always do the best job filtering down to the folks that are doing the work. Whereas to me, using objectives and key results and dovetailing them within an EOS structure, it's that missing piece of taking the theoretical and the big picture and turning it into, okay, I have to finish my peas today. There's still peas on the plate. Does that make sense?
Great. Totally. What I get asked a lot is some variation of the question, what are the right operations for my business? I'm doing that in quotes, right? What are the capital R right operations for my business? Guys, operations, I think of it as like a carpenter with a toolbox, right? We've got hammers, we've got screwdrivers. The question is, what's the job that's trying to get done? What's the issue? What's the gap? And so is OKRs the right thing to do for your business? I have no idea. Tell me what's going on in your business, right? And then I'll give you the right tool to close the gap. And so the challenge I have with an overarching system, something like EOS, is that it is this kind of one size fits all grand methodology that is purported to work in all use cases. And the reality is that every business is unique. Every founder is unique. The challenges that they're running into, their team is unique, and their goals are unique. And so with that level of specificity, we have to be able to say, yeah, hammers are awesome. We love hammers, but you don't actually need a hammer in your business. You need a screwdriver. You have a different job to be done. And so that's the level of critical thinking that I think needs to be brought to the table, ideally by somebody in your team, right? An operator who is uniquely responsible for identifying the gaps and then identifying the right tool needed to plug the gap. Because what I will say, JB, is, if we're talking about this evolution that a founder goes through, a lot of the founders, when I hop on call with them, they've realized, okay, like what got me here will not get me there. I need to evolve. I need to level up. So does that mean I need to become this systems, operational, organizational structure guru? No, it does not, right? In fact, you will waste a lot of time and energy and happiness trying to force yourself to step into a different version of your visionary genius. And in fact, your company will suffer for you trying to step out of your visionary genius and shove yourself into this operator, square peg round hole. So my recommendation always is that there is a counterpart that you need to have in your business. Someone who brings that unique operational lens and is the yin to your yang, so they can tell you, hey, this is a hammer situation or this is a screwdriver situation. Because from where you're standing, it may not actually be that clear.
Oh my goodness, 100%. And I'm reminded when you say that, and I steal this all the time when I'm talking to clients, because most surprisingly have still never heard of the concept. There's an incredible book that's been out for quite a while by, I think it's Gene Wickman and Mark Winters, called
Talking about
Rocket Fuel. Yeah. And that book, it really goes deep into the concept that you just described, which is that most businesses who are scaling, I'm not talking about a little tiny small business. That's a little bit of an aside. You can use the same theology if you want to scale that business. But if you're just sort of cool being a solopreneur, this is not talking to you. But for anyone else who's scaling, in almost every business, and in reading the book, most people can pretty quickly, without even taking the test that they have, they can pretty quickly figure out which of these they are. But you have generally, the way that they describe it is that you have a visionary. And if we take a company, it gives it in the book, that's Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs for Apple was very much the visionary, unbelievable ability to see into the future and to sort of create and predict what might happen, what people might want, where the products should go. Then you also have what they call an integrator. And that's really, COO is generally also going to be that same bucket. That person, and they have this unbelievable quote in there that is sort of like the string to the balloon, where the integrator can hear all of the amazing, gigantic ideas that the visionary has and say, man, those are awesome. Here's what needs to be true in order for all of those things to actually be implemented and to turn into reality. And then from that, with those two people, or, it might be more than one, but with those folks collaborating together, you tend to be able to come to a place where it's like, okay, maybe this one doesn't mean it's a terrible idea. It just means that the cost of implementing it may be greater than what we're willing to do. Or it's literally impossible for that to be true based upon what we do. So here's my question, and I'll put my visionary hat on, because I knew before I took the test, but I'm very much a visionary, super high visionary. Yeah. You probably can tell that just talking to me. And I could tell talking to you that it doesn't mean that you don't have visionary capability. It means that you're probably more integrator. And same with me. It's like an 80% visionary. I have about 20% integrator.
Yeah.
But anytime that I have to live for too long an integrator, I don't like my life. I don't enjoy it. I like what can be, but the details elude me. So if someone is like me and they really are that chief visionary role, and we'll start with that and then we'll go the other way, and they realize the book, Jhana is right. I need someone who can sort of, and forgive my French here, folks, but I need someone to help me get my shit together. And I need someone to help me to really systematize this business and to turn it into a big boy business. But they don't know how to do it. How the hell do I go about doing that? And they go through this cycle of maybe half measures, bad hires, etc. How can people more predictably solve for, if they don't have that really strong integrator person in their organization, how can they solve for that?
Yeah. Well, facetiously, they can work with us.
Yeah.
Right. Like that is literally what we do.
Tee you up right there, Jhana.
Teeing it up. Because here's the thing, the underlying challenge is that you're looking for your equal but opposite.
Yes.
Right. If you're a visionary looking for an operator, you're looking for all of the things that you intrinsically are not. And so that's really hard to find. It's really hard to see because it is your mirror opposite.
It's a bit like finding a spouse.
Right. And like, we all know how hard that is and how many bad dates you have to go on. The challenge is that the cost of a mishire at the leadership level is minimum of 5x the annual salary. So if we're going on a bunch of bad dates, right, like we're getting engaged to the wrong people, every single one of those diamond rings is costing us around $500K when we get it wrong.
Yeah.
So the cost of doing it wrong is massive. And the time associated with doing it wrong is massive. And so people will come to us after already making a bad hire or two, and they'll draw the conclusion that I guess operators must just not be for me.
They're terrible.
Right? I've
Doesn't
tried
work
to hire for this role. I know. I've tried to bring it in. They didn't work out. They disappointed me. XYZ issue. And I can almost guarantee that the issue wasn't that for some reason your business is the unique unicorn where operations isn't going to work for you. The issue is that we haven't found the right yin to your yang. And so the way that we solve that problem, JB, is by getting really clear on who is this visionary and what is their business, right? We will come in and do a full-blown operational audit before we go out and we find an operator, because we're not just looking for somebody with a good resume with 5 years of experience in your exact business model. We're looking for somebody who's a personality fit to you, a culture fit to your team, where their exact skills are an exact match for the unique operational problems that your business is trying to solve. We're looking for somebody who is going to be able to communicate well with you and earn and build your trust, right? So there is so much more to finding, your soulmate, right? Like your spouse, than just saying, they've got, a good Tinder profile. Like that's the equivalent of going out and trying to look for a resume to find this person. And so the reality is that you have to go a lot deeper than that into what do you need as a unique visionary and what does your business need in this role specifically?
Now, how long in your experience, let's say you've got a company that's sort of just broken that 8-figure mark. They're scaling, but they're stuck in a lot of different places and they have that visionary owner. How long should and does a process run correctly take to, one, quantify everything you just said? So one, quantify what is the business, what is the founder, where are the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, etc. Now that we've benchmarked that, now we kind of know what we need. Now we need to go out and find that thing. How long should or does that process take for most people?
For most people, probably 3 to 6 months to do it correctly. For us, 5 weeks.
Holy smokes.
1 week to do the audit, 30 days to find the operator.
Well, shoot, guys, if you didn't hear that, listen, normally I don't aggressively plug people, but I'm going to plug working with Jhana or someone like her. And there's a reason. There's no compensation at all between the two of us. We just literally met at an event a few weeks ago, but you have to understand the pain that I get to hear in the voices of founders and entrepreneurs every day. And it kills me because I know it's solvable, but they do get to a point where you said it a little bit earlier, which was they may have tried and it didn't work out. And actually the same thing happens with key hires in general, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say, we've tried to hire for example, like a CTO or a chief marketing officer, or a lot of times it's a financial person. So, we've really tried to hire that person that was, responsible for keeping our books clean and giving us information that was actionable in real time. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. The same is true of that COO integrator role. It also happens with virtual assistants. There was an interesting synchronicity to this conversation in the event we were at, because I was challenged by, and this doesn't happen that often, but I was challenged by one of the other speakers at the same event who has a fairly large staffing and virtual assistant company. I've been pretty anti-VA for a long time. The reasons that I've been anti-VA are everything you just said. Every time I tried to bring on VAs for different tasks, it just didn't work out. And so instead of examining the way that I went to sort of quantify what those roles were, what great looked like, some logic to how I went through that process, I just would bring them on and they wouldn't work. Maybe they would just not know how to do the job, not do the job to my satisfaction, or sometimes even they would do the job well for like a week or two and then sort of disappear into the ether.
Right.
And so what I did for years was say to myself, okay, VAs aren't going to work. This is terrible. You can't do that. This gentleman in, I don't know, his talk was 26 minutes, kind of slayed through my own preconceived notions. And really what I was left with was what I'm always left with. And what I try to leave entrepreneurs and founders with, which is the problem is in the mirror. The problem was me. The problem was me not doing a good job of how I went about that hiring process, not being patient enough to really be thoughtful in how I trained those people and what I was asking them to do. And so when you work through something like that, it infinitely, after you get through that initial pain, it's like going to the gym. It sucks at first. And once you start doing it, you start to see some results and it feels better. The same is true when you bring on that COO role. But for a company like you to be able to sort of sand around the rough edges and distill down that process into a predictable result that takes, if my math is right, less than half the time that it normally would take. Guys, run, don't walk, run. To work with Jhana or someone like her, because if you have this need, I can't tell you how much better your business, your life, your mental health will be if you bring that person into your company, integrate them into what you're doing, pun intended, and then just grow together versus the old, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you know you're going to get the same results. And so to have someone available like Jhana and her, I didn't know there were companies that did what you do. Of course, I knew there were staffing companies. But what I think is really cool about you guys, and it comes through because you've been a COO, because you've been a part of so many startups, and because you've been in the weeds. It's the same reason that I'm an unusual exit planner and M&A person. I started as a business owner. I didn't start as a banker. And so because I started as a business owner, I'm naturally the old PPS, right? A professional problem solver. I viscerally understand what these folks are going through, and there's no judgment, and I can sort of Sherpa them through what needs to happen and what needs to be true. And I get the same sense from you that because you've done it, I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could tell us some stories where we've all been punched in the mouth and made the mistakes, and we're just trying to help others to avoid that.
100%. And one thing well, first off, thank you, JP. I appreciate the validation. And one thing that I want to speak to is one of the big fears blocking people sometimes from wanting to work with someone like us is I already have this person and they've been with me for a long time. I don't know if I already have this person on my team. I think maybe there's somebody who does kind of opsy system stuff. Are they my operator?
Opsy system.
And so, again, like you're looking for a yin yang here and you're wondering, do I already have the right person? And the statistical answer is about 40% of the time, yes, right? Part of what we do in that audit is we look for what I call the hidden operator. Do you have somebody already on your team where the know-like trust factor between you and that individual is already built, which is huge and insanely important for this role. And with just a couple of key unlocks around their knowledge and their skills and their understanding of operations, they could really level up and they could really be that person that's going to get you to the next stage of your business. That is best case scenario in my mind, because you don't have to buy an extra expensive salary. You already know this person.
Trust.
And so much of hiring, you're right, even working with, a specialist like us, you're rolling the dice on whether you're actually going to like this person 6 months down the road, right? Yeah. And so there's so much benefit by having the right person in the role or having the right person on the team and being able to move them in the role. But on the flip side, we've also had to tell clients, you asked about horror stories. We've also had to tell clients that like, hey, you put your wife in this role. She's actually not the right operator, and we need to manage her out of this position, which we've done.
Roll,
right?
Raggy.
That's right. Well, and here's the thing. Their marriage has never been stronger because she was in a role that she wasn't meant to be in, that wasn't her zone of genius, wasn't working well for either of them.
Creating friction.
The business was suffering. Yeah, the relationship was suffering. So the question is like we see it all ways and we do it all ways. But at the end of the day, you need the right second in command in this position in order for you to be able to stay in that CEO visionary role and ultimately like drive revenue and drive your business to the size and the valuation that you want it to be. And so the question is just, do you already have that person in? If not, okay, let's go find them. And if you think you do, get clear on that question first before you work with me or anybody else to go out and hire in a very expensive salary that you may not actually need to incur.
I love that. And it brings up another piece of an audit that I do anytime I go to work with someone, which is, what do we have? What do we want? What do we need? And that mostly has to do with resources, and resources falls to, the technical capabilities that you have, maybe it's inventory structures, whatever that is, but also people. It's often people. And what you run into is there's a thing that can happen that just all of us as owners, if we're not careful, we could go solve someone else's problems that are not personal to us in 2 hours. And they might be very similar to the very problem that we're having. But the reason that we're not able to solve it is because we can get a little myopic. And when you're too close to something, you don't see the cliche forest through the trees. And
Totally.
There have been many times where I have talked with folks and they say something like, oh gosh, we just don't have this ops person or whatever. When in reality, I'm doing an independent audit. And I always do 360s with key people in the organization, because that's very important to me as I prepare them for exit, and knowing what does everybody do? What is the likelihood that they're going to stay or want to stay if the company is moved forward, et cetera. And very often I'll find someone that I immediately say, whether it's personality profile or just talking to them or just the nature of what they do, you have this person, you just haven't empowered them and you haven't invested in their training and development. And I'll have that conversation, because the cool thing about being me is I get to have very direct conversations with people, and they usually don't get upset because they know that I'm doing it because I really care about what happens. In fact, I'll tell people, look, I care so much about you that I may be at this moment the only person in your life who's willing to tell you the truth, even if it means you get mad enough to want to fire me. It's still my job to tell you the truth, because if the first time you hear really bad things about your business is when you go to sell it, someone didn't do their job. So I'll talk to those folks and say, listen, I think you already have, Kristen or Charlie here. Everything I see in them tells me that they can be this person. Why haven't you invested in them? And they don't often say it this way, but what they're really saying is, well, I'm afraid to spend that money investing in them and it won't work. Or
100%.
What if I invest in them and they become really important to the organization and their skills improve and they leave? And inevitably, and I stole this from somebody, I never figured out who said it first, or I would absolutely give them credit, but I always am incredulous. And I say, well, what if you don't improve their skills and they stay? How does that help you? So I love that you're saying that, look, you may not even have to go out and hire someone. It may just be that you do have a person there who they just need some help. They need someone to come alongside them and say, you're 80% there. It's just that 20% is a bear and the devil lies in the details. So let's help you with some scaffolding underneath you so that it's safe. Let's help you to improve upon those skills and just bridge the gap between what you are and what the organization really needs you to be.
Yeah. And in fairness to the founder who's resonating with this right now, again, a visionary trying to train and up-level an operator is like,
nope.
It's like a horse trying to train a chicken, right? Nope. Like, it's just two completely different ways of being. And so that there's an intrinsic paradox there of how do I turn this person into something better than me in a role that I don't know how to do to begin with? And so we also solve for that, right? I'm like, don't do that. Give that person to me. Put them in my COO Academy. Give them to me to train. I will level them up into the operator that you need. And to have the risk mitigation there of and if they leave, we replace them. And if they leave, you still have access to the training and all these other things. That's that additional safety net, because I totally get it. It's a lot to pour into somebody and make them this important and essential to your business. But when you find that right second in command, in the context of exit particularly, you're creating continuity, right? You're finding that key person that's not just going to grow your business to the goals that you have for it, but is going to see your business through a massive transition and do right by your future buyer to take that company to the next level. And the value of having somebody at the helm, the value of having that point of continuity at the leadership team and leadership level is enormous to a potential buyer who wants somebody who already knows the business and already effectively runs the day-to-day of that company. And so to your point, JB, it's oh man, but what if I pour into this person? What if you don't? And what potential value are you losing out on when this person could have been great?
Absolutely. And really to tie this into building to sell, I get such a unique privilege to be in the room with so many buyers all the time and investors. And they, look, they're all different, because you have institutional investors that tend to be private equity or family office, and they have a certain sort of buy box is what we call it, shopping list really of what they're looking for. And then you have strategics that are in every industry that they may be looking to consolidate and grab market share, or competitors, or even just individuals. They do all have some different sort of piccadillies and risk tolerances of what they're looking for. But here's the common thing that all of them want. At the end of the day, as a business owner, and we're trying to prepare for an exit, there are two things that anyone who buys the business is going to want, and they want it to the highest degree possible: predictability and confidence. Predictability that whatever the trend is of the business, however the business operates, that it is likely to continue along that same trend, or at least not regress. And so everything we can do that increases the confidence level in that predictability gives that buyer confidence that my investment will be a good investment and will be likely to pay dividends down the line. And so, simply put, every time you make a decision in your business and you try to decide what structure, ask yourself, is this increasing or reducing predictability in my business? And if the answer to that is affirmative, you're probably in the right direction. Now, something that you said that was interesting about training chickens and horses was that, no, I loved it. That happens a lot, where you have someone who is a visionary trying to train someone up to be an operator. And to me, I always think about this because I do a lot of work with men outside of business, just men when it comes to being a husband, being a father, those things. I don't do work with women in that area. And the reason is I work with women in business all the time. Some of the best badasses I know are women, and I can work with women on all sorts of assets of business. But I have absolutely no business trying to teach a woman how to be a better mother or wife, because I don't know anything about how to do those things. I can teach a man to be a better husband and a father. I can teach him to be more present. I can teach him to interact well with them. I can teach him to manage stress. I have no business trying to teach a mom how to do the things that only a mom can do. And the reverse is true. So here's an interesting one for you. And this just may be a fun question, may not have an answer to it, but what about the other side of that coin? What happens when the person who is the founder is an unbelievable operator? They're already good, but they're constrained. So my guess is that the way you would work with them is just to multiply themselves with other folks who can do the same thing. But if you're asking yourself out there and you identify more with everything that we've talked about, the things that Jhana has been saying, you're like, yes, I do those things. These are amazing. She's right. Preach, girl. And then you have the second thought of like, everything that we have, we've already systemized. I don't know what to do next. What that says is that you probably are not a visionary. So what can people do? And I have some thoughts, but I want yours. What can people do who are not visionaries and know it to continue to scale, knowing that that visionary component is important?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question to ask me as the operator turned visionary of my own business, right? Couple of options there. Number one, you can partner and bring it in, right? If you really thrive in that operator hat, then bringing in someone who can wear the visionary hat is going to solve the other piece of the puzzle, right? You're just going in the opposite direction, but you're partnering, you're finding that person, you're bringing them in. They don't have to necessarily be a equity partner, right? We've helped people fire themselves out of the CEO role and step into other roles within the business because CEO is actually better held by somebody else. So that's totally an option. The secondary option, this is more the route that I've gone, is break down that CEO role into a couple of different hats. One of those hats is visionary, as in the holder of the vision. I have the vision for where I want this business to end up, and I can clarify and communicate that vision better than anybody else because it's mine. But when it comes to the rest of what a visionary does, right, being outward facing and charismatic and hopping on podcasts and rallying the team and building a culture and doing these other things, maybe that's not what I resonate with. And that you can figure out how to delegate, right? So you don't have to relinquish control of your vision to relinquish control of being the CEO that is spearheading your business and moving it forward. Does that make sense, GB?
Yeah. And you really,
yeah.
I promise we didn't do this beforehand, but you said exactly what I would have, which is that
okay, great.
You want to try to, if you know that, and again, we're talking big picture here, so I don't want you to beat yourself up. But if you know that you're a really good operator, and you can tell if I look at your business, it's going to take me 15 minutes to know what the founder likely is. And it's rare to find 100-0. It's very rare to find 100% one, 0 the other. More often than not, it's 90-10, 80-20. The rare sort of dodo bird, actually, I should say not dodo, that was a real bird, the snipe. I used to send my kids on snipe hunts. It was really fun when they were young enough to buy it. But the rare snipe is the entrepreneur who's like 50-50 or even 60-40. Yeah. That's unusual. And those folks usually, their problem isn't necessarily they struggle with vision or ops. It's generally constraints. They get to the point where they wear themselves out, burn themselves out. But what you do is you bucket off different pieces of what a visionary would be, right? So you have one person who can take the overall mission and output of the company, whatever that is. And they're just a person who's naturally good at taking that vision and turning it into a compelling talk, taking that version and turning it into excitement around whatever it is. And it may be podcasts, it may be speeches, it may be interacting with, high level clients, whatever. That's usually what I call passion. That person has to have passion, and they need to be articulate, and they need to be someone that others are drawn to and will believe in. That can actually be a role that you hire. It doesn't necessarily have to be you, because here's the thing that person needs. How do I know? I am that person. That person needs an unbelievable team around them to actually pull through and deliver upon all the big checks that their mouth is writing, because we're all really good at that. And the reason is there's no nefariousness to it. It's someone who's a high visionary sincerely believes in the possibility of human beings. High
conviction.
Yeah. And what we can achieve. And I'm notorious for saying, cool, we think we can do this. Let's just go a little higher than that. And I don't know if it comes from an athletic background or what, but there's like, okay, here's what we think we're capable of, but what if we could do a little bit more? And you guys figure it out. It's just, a lot of fun. But if you bucket off the individual pieces of what would constitute a visionary, or actually, I suppose we could do it in reverse too. If you get that operator person, if you bucket off the key roles and responsibilities of each person, it becomes sort of a manageable thing where you can say, oh, shoot, okay, here's really what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who can be a brand ambassador, a chief creative officer, any number of those things. And then we as a team come up with a structure to which we meet regularly, and we ping pong back these ideas. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you put Jhana and I in a room for 8 hours and you said, here's a niche that neither of you have ever had any exposure to whatsoever, you need to build a business of this revenue within 2 years. I'm going to bet that because of the differences in our personality, but also some of the carryover, that after that 8 hours, we would come up with a pretty badass idea. We would know how to implement it, how to start, and what it would look like for that 2 years. That would be better than either one of us could have come up with by ourselves. It's not that we wouldn't have been able to come up with something that would work. It's that putting those two roles and personalities together is usually where a lot of the magic happens. So, one, good conversation. I think we've given folks a lot to think about and a lot of meat on the bone. What I would love to do, this is the point in the show where I like to ask just a few fun questions, and then we'll tell folks where they can interact with you and what that might look like. But so
I love it.
Now that we've gone so deep into the weeds here, how the hell, one, where are you from?
I'm from Colorado. So I live in Salt Lake City.
So grew up in Colorado, moved a little bit over to Salt Lake City. How do you go from, wherever your life started to the quirky niche of being this sort of passionate champion of operations? How does that happen?
Yeah. So between Colorado and Utah, I did a 2.5-year hiatus in a van where I was living full time in a van.
Was it by the river?
By the river, all the way through North and South America, so many rivers. And I was traveling with a now ex-boyfriend who was the visionary, starting his business, scaling it up. And I stumbled into this thing called operations by just helping him from the background build this company. And
he's looking over the
way,
passenger seat like, Jen, I don't know how to do this. Can you come up here and help me?
Literally the shit show. You would not believe. But I stumbled into operations, right? I stumbled into it by finding that I had a unique counterpoint lens, not knowing shit about what I was doing or anything about business, but just realizing I saw things differently and I could contribute a different lens. And one thing led to another. I, studied really, really hard. I got the opportunity to look at hundreds of different businesses. All of that happened in the van. And when I settled in Utah, I was clear that, this is really who I be and this is how I'm able to uniquely serve people.
I love it. If I'm not going to ask your age. I know you're significantly younger than me, but if you could go back and you could talk to 15-year-old Jhana, what would you say?
I would tell her that the single highest thing she can work to cultivate is self-trust. And she doesn't have to learn everything in the world. She doesn't have to be perfect at everything in the world. She just needs to be good at one thing, which is listening to herself, trusting her intuition, and trusting her ability to figure anything out. And if she has that, there is literally no challenge that is insurmountable.
That's beautiful. As a father I have son and daughters. I ask this question of everyone because I absolutely take them, transcribe them, and I go tell them to my kids.
I love that.
So
good hack.
That's beautiful. That's one of the better ones I've heard. So thank you for that. Finally, if someone listening to this, it's resonated and they're like, yeah, I have a scale issue and I believe that, or maybe a time issue personally. And I believe that the solutions JB and Jenna were talking about might help me. And I jihad, with the Southern phrase, with Jhana. How can they reach out to you? What does that look like?
Yep. So the best way to learn around what it is that we do, you can check us out on our website, spyglassops.com. If you just want to connect with me, ask me a question, a follow-up, even an aha takeaway, I would love to hear it. Connect with me on Instagram at the Jhana Li, and that's the best place to get in touch with me directly.
And I'll put the link in there so that you guys know her spelling and how to connect with her. So my new friend, thank you so much. This has been personally gratifying because this is just a fun conversation that I don't get to have all that often. And I so very much honor and appreciate you for being willing to share some of your insights and experience with us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.